The sun rose dry and red over the Llano Estacado, and the wind already smelled of dust and cattle before a single hoof hit the ground. In the panhandle country of Texas, where money grew on fences and power on bloodlines, folks knew the name Monroe Carrigan. He wasn't just a rancher, he was the rancher. 500,000 acres of drought-hardened rangeland, thousands of head of longhorn, rail contracts inked with his name, and a house built with limestone carted in from Fredericksburg. All this he commanded with the quiet arrogance of a man who'd never been denied. He was tall, sun-burnished, 47, and widowed twice. His first wife had drowned in the Rio Concho after a mule spooked and overturned their cart. His second succumbed to childbed fever 3 winters after, taking the child with her. Since then he'd become myth more than man, an empire on horseback, ruthless with men and evasive with women. The land didn't forgive weakness. Neither did Monroe, but people age, even legends. His joints complained in the morning. His brother's children had turned soft in their city suits. The ranch, vast as it was, whispered of future decline. He needed an heir. That required a wife, and not just any woman. Someone strong enough to bear the Carrigan name, but docile enough not to fight it. Beautiful, yes, healthy, useful, sharp enough to keep the books, but quiet when he didn't ask. So the hunt began. Monroe sent word through his foremen, through church elders and shipping barons. Eligible women, widows, daughters, debutantes, were invited under veiled pretenses to the ranch. Some arrived by carriage, some by train, some with hope already blooming in their cheeks. Monroe did not court them, he watched. At dinner on the porch during branding days, he made them walk the perimeter of the barn. He asked them how they'd feed a crying infant when the well was frozen over, how they'd handle a servant who talked back, how they'd deal with a husband gone 3 weeks in New Mexico with no word sent home. Some passed his tests. Most didn't. Those who lingered longest grew thin-lipped with resentment. When one woman wept after being asked to gut a chicken, Monroe dismissed her without a word. He was used to control. He liked things that obeyed. So when the girl in the green calico dress arrived, leaning on a carved stick with a limp he could see from the porch, Monroe nearly walked away. Her name was Alma Dillard, 27. From the eastern edge of Arkansas, if the accent was true. Her people, she said, had died off slow and quiet, malaria, cotton debts, and one bullet fired in jealousy outside a roadhouse. Her father had taught her to shoot before he drank himself to death, and she'd come west because there wasn't anything left behind her but mud and pine shadows. A wagon wheel had shattered her knee in her 17th year. She limped ever since. "Why are you here?" Monroe asked flatly, standing in the vast hush of the dusk. "To see if I'm wanted," she replied, not defiant, not pleading, just factual. Her eyes didn't shine like the others. They didn't dart either. They held steady, quiet, dark. He should have dismissed her then. She was plain in a way that only became beautiful after long study. One hand curled slightly inward, stiff from old tendon damage. Her walk was labored, not fast. Not graceful, but she didn't flinch when his gelding reared beside her. She didn't avert her gaze when he stepped closer, squinting against the setting sun. "You'll stay 3 days," he said. "You'll eat with the hands. If you lie, I'll know. If you want to be coddled, don't unpack." She nodded once and turned back toward the bunkhouse. By the second day, his cook was singing her praises. By the third, Monroe sat alone on the porch, chewing the inside of his cheek, watching her walk with a wooden bucket to feed scraps to the pigs. The limp, he thought, should bother him, but it didn't. She moved with deliberateness, never wasting a step. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it changed her face completely. It made her look like a woman who knew pain but hadn't let it rot her. That night, she sat across from him in the dining room for the first time. "You wouldn't have let me in if I'd come pretty and unbroken," she said softly, after the plates had been cleared and the candles burned low. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "You let me stay because you knew I wouldn't beg for it. Silence stretched long. "You think you understand me?" he asked. "No," she replied, "but I've met men like you before. They only care what a woman can endure." Monroe leaned back in his chair and studied her. She didn't fidget. That night, as he lay in the room he once shared with two dead wives, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the even, dragging sound of her step outside, the slow scrape of her cane, the way she'd answered without fear. He was not a man who believed in love, but his heart, for the first time in a decade, moved slightly. And it unsettled him more than any ambush, any drought, any financial risk he'd ever faced. Monroe woke before dawn and didn't open his ledger. That alone startled his steward. For 17 years, Monroe Carrigan had begun each day measuring the cost of feed, the yield of cattle, and the slow encroachment of rival interests along the Pecos. But that morning he walked the outer fence line himself, hat low, jaw set, boots pressing down sagebrush. He didn't know why. He told himself it was to test the new foreman's work. He told himself it had nothing to do with the woman in the bunkhouse. Alma had risen earlier still. She stood knee-deep in the paddock, brushing down the older mare with a rhythm that was neither hurried nor cautious. The horse, usually mean with strangers, stood quiet. She had a way of moving that didn't startle animals. She didn't try to soothe with voice or flattery. She just made herself a steady part of the world, unmoving, reliable. Her cane leaned against the fence post nearby, forgotten for a moment. She didn't need it while she worked. "Most women try to win the ranch with a dress and a smile," came Monroe's voice behind her. "You think horses'll do the job instead." She kept brushing. "They don't lie," she said. He walked closer. She smelled of liniment, dust, and faint lemon soap. Her braid was thick, dark, tied with a worn piece of leather. The limp was more pronounced today, and she didn't mask the pain. That was new. Other women had tried to hide their weaknesses. She never had. "Why haven't you left?" he asked. "I wasn't told to," she said, finally meeting his eyes. Monroe liked that answer more than he wanted to admit. He turned and walked off without a word. That week, storms rolled in from the west. Dry thunder first, then hard rain. The kind that turned roads to soup and made the men stay close to the barns. Monroe was inside sorting contracts when he heard the cry. It was a boy's voice, sharp, scared. He stepped outside into the squall and saw one of the cook's twins wailing near the well. Alma was already there. The boy's arm was caught in the old pulley crank, twisted up to the elbow, skin scraped raw. She was speaking to him in a low tone, her hand pressed firm on his back. She didn't shout for help. She didn't freeze. She wedged herself against the wood post, braced her good shoulder, and twisted the crank backward with both hands. The bones in her arms strained. Her bad leg trembled violently. Monroe ran, arriving just as the boy's arm came free. Alma nearly collapsed. He caught her under the arms. "Get inside," he barked at the boy, who took off like a scared rabbit. She sagged against him, not from faintness. He knew the difference, but from sheer pain. Her breath came hard through her nose. "You'll ruin yourself," he said. She shook her head. He was screaming. Someone had to. Her skin was wet and cold. He helped her back to the bunkhouse, though she never asked for it. When he tried to send for the doctor, she stopped him. "No man touches me unless I ask," she said, and for a moment Monroe felt a flicker of shame. "You think you'll heal right without setting it," he said. "It's not broken," she replied. "It's just remembering things it don't want to." That night she didn't show for supper. But Monroe found himself walking to her window and seeing the soft glow of her lamp, the shadows of her hands moving slowly over a tin basin. Cleaning herself, tending alone. In the days that followed, something shifted between them. He asked her to help tally calf counts. She asked to ride the South Range, even if she'd need to stop often. He obliged, half expecting her to quit halfway. She didn't. She rode with the quiet fortitude of someone used to doing hard things the long way. She packed dried fruit in a handkerchief. She shot a rattlesnake without a tremor. And when they camped overnight beneath the stars, she didn't try to speak her way into his good favor. She didn't speak at all unless spoken to. He liked that, but he also hated that he liked it. The ranch was whispering now. The hands noticed the way he watched her. The kitchen girls saw how Alma's meals were always served hot. A rumor passed through the corrals and along the hay bales that Kerrigan had taken a shine to the cripple, that maybe she'd bewitched him. That maybe it was just pity. When Monroe heard it, he snapped a fence post in two with his bare hands. The foreman stopped speaking mid-sentence. That night, Monroe called Alma to the main house. She entered without fear, her cane clicking against the floorboards. "There's talk," he said, pacing the hearth. "Foolish talk." "About me." "About me," he corrected. "I don't let the ranch decide my mind. But I don't suffer scandal." Alma stood by the mantel, her dress still damp from the river ride that afternoon. She wasn't afraid, but she was guarded now. "Do you want me gone?" He looked at her, really looked. Her left eye had a scar just below the lid, thin as a fishhook, likely from a childhood accident. Her hands bore the calluses of real labor. Her voice stayed low, like someone trained not to take up too much space. But her presence filled the room all the same. "I don't know what I want," he said finally. "Then don't ask me to leave until you do." She turned to go. He caught her wrist, not hard, not cruelly. Just enough to feel her pulse against his thumb. "You make me forget myself," he said, and there was a note of something raw in it. She held his gaze for a long moment. "Then maybe you're just remembering who you were before you started trying so hard to be someone else." She left him standing there, heart clenching. He didn't sleep that night either. Spring came harsh that year, with a late freeze that ruined the pecan grove and killed 2 calves still wet from birth. Men worked double shifts to haul feed up from San Angelo, and tempers frayed like old rope. A ranch of that size didn't stop running just because the weather turned against it. But Monroe Kerrigan did something no one expected. He let Alma take charge. Not formally, he never made speeches. But when the kitchen pump broke, he asked her how best to ration water. When a sick cow turned up near the eastern pasture, he sent her to identify the illness. When one of the ranch hands refused to take orders from a woman, Monroe dismissed him before sundown. No one dared ask why. They saw the way Monroe watched her, not with lust, not with pity, but with something older. Recognition, maybe. As if she carried some buried truth about the land or the men who broke themselves trying to tame it. Alma didn't bask in it. She didn't take up space she hadn't earned. She worked harder than anyone, dragging her bad leg through flood mud and sleeping upright when storms rolled through. Monroe gave her a room in the main house after one such night, when the bunkhouse roof caved in during a hail squall. He didn't ask. He just gestured. She moved in with 1 box, 3 dresses, and a rifle that had seen better years. That night they shared whiskey for the first time. Monroe sat near the hearth, nursing his glass. She took hers straight, no wince. "You were married once," he said quietly. "No, almost." He lost a bet and hung himself over a fence post in Benton. Monroe said nothing. "I didn't cry for him," she added. "Didn't feel anything at all. That scared me more than his dying." Monroe understood that kind of silence. It lived in him too. Later she stood to leave and he rose too quickly, forgetting himself. "Stay," he said, voice tight. She looked at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. "Why?" He hesitated, then. "Because when you're here, the house feels like it's not waiting to bury someone." She stayed, but she did not sleep in his bed, not that night, not for weeks. She took the room across the hall and left her door open just enough to hear the boards creak. Monroe didn't touch her, didn't ask. They shared silence and heat and coffee in the coldest hour before dawn. The ranch changed, workers sharpened up. Fights stopped breaking out. Orders got carried out faster. No one said it out loud, but it was understood. Alma Dillard was not just some woman Monroe had taken a liking to. She was being weighed, not as a mistress, as a partner. Then came the Bennick brothers. They rode in from the North Trail, 4 men thick with arrogance and dust, looking to buy out a strip of Carrigan land near the riverbed. Monroe refused. They stayed on another 2 days, offering drinks, making noise at the saloon, poking around his boundaries like wolves in fresh snow. Alma didn't trust them from the start. "I've seen eyes like theirs," she told Monroe on the second night. "They're not just buyers, they're checking your defenses." Monroe nodded. "I can handle them." "I know," she said. "But can the people you love?" He looked at her then, long and quiet. That night someone fired a shot near the stables, not aimed to kill, just a message, a scare. Monroe found Alma awake, sitting on the edge of her bed with the old rifle in her lap. She wasn't shaking. "They're trying to spook us," she said. "They'll be gone by morning." But they were. The next day, a fire broke out in the northern hay barn. Alma was the first one there, dragging water buckets with her limp. Monroe followed, shouting orders. The fire was contained, but the message was clear. "You need to make it formal," she said that night, her hair damp with sweat and smoke. "Whatever this is between us, name me. Or they'll see me as a weakness you haven't claimed." He frowned. "You think I should marry you out of strategy?" "I think you should marry me before someone tries to take me apart to hurt you." Monroe didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "What if I want it to be more than a defense?" Alma set her rifle against the hearth and sat across from him. "I ain't ever going to be soft," she said. "I'll never give you a sweet smile when I'm bleeding inside. I'll never need your name to know who I am." "I know. But if you ask me with truth, I'll say yes." He crossed the room, took her hand. No kneeling, no ring. Just 2 people scarred in ways the world couldn't see, finding something stubborn and rare between them. "Will you?" he asked. "Yes," she said. They were married in the parlor 5 days later. No lace, no audience, just the preacher from Abilene, Monroe's foreman to witness, and Alma in her plainest dress. She walked the aisle with her cane. She did not veil her face. When they kissed, Monroe held her with both hands, like she was something breakable and strong all at once. That night, they shared a bed. She took his hand and placed it over the scar on her thigh, the twisted ridge where the bone had set wrong. He didn't flinch, he pressed his lips to it, and for the first time in years, both of them slept the whole night through. Summer burned across the mesa, cruel and bright. Dust coated everything, horses, children, lungs. But the ranch held firm, more efficient than it had been in years. Monroe no longer kept every decision tight in his grip. Alma handled the East Quarter alone now, managing hands who once wouldn't take orders from her at all. They respected her because she bled for the land same as they did. When a Mustang broke loose and kicked her square in the ribs, she refused the doctor, wrapped herself in her own bedsheets, and was back walking fence line 2 days later. Rumors about her slowed. The men saw the way Monroe looked at her like she was bone and stone, not porcelain. They stopped snickering. She never smiled unless she meant it. But when she did, even the older ranch hands grew quiet. For a while, life settled into a rhythm. Work at dawn, shared meals, ledger work done side by side in the evenings. At night, Monroe's hand always found her hip in the dark, not possessive, just sure. And then the telegram came. It arrived in the second week of August. The wire station boy brought it sweating, hat in hand. Alma read it first. Her face didn't change. "You're wanted in Fort Worth," she said, placing the slip in Monroe's palm. "Railman from New York's offering twice market value for your western tract. Wants to talk in person." He looked at her. "Do I go?" "That depends," she said. "You selling?" Not unless he's got more land than I do. Monroe left that afternoon. Alma took over in his absence. 2 days later, she caught a thief gutting the storeroom, a local kid barely shaving yet. He tried to run. She shot the ground in front of his foot and walked up with her cane raised. "You'd better stop before I forget you're just stupid," she said. He did. She made him work off the debt shoveling stalls. That was Alma's way, fair but never soft. But Monroe's absence dragged longer than expected. 4 days, then 7. Then 10. Alma paced the porch each night, scanning the horizon. He sent no word, no rider, no telegram. By the 12th day, she saddled up herself. The trip to Fort Worth took 2 days by rail, and she rode alone. When she arrived, the station clerk recognized her name and handed her a sealed note. Negotiations extended. Staying on. All's well. She didn't believe it. The hotel where he was said to be staying knew nothing of him. The rail office denied any active land purchase under Kerrigan's name. Alma's jaw clenched tight. She checked the hospital. Nothing. The jail. Nothing. She paid a boy to knock on every backroom poker den from Camp Bowie to Hell's Half Acre. On the third night, she found him. He was in a small, dim parlor room above a saloon, alone, alive, but drunk, which she'd never seen before. He'd shaved his beard and looked years older without it. There was no blood, no fight. Just exhaustion, like something inside him had cracked. "I thought you were dead," she said, stepping in. He looked up, eyes dull. "I thought maybe that was better." She stared at him. "You want to explain that before I drag you home and beat you senseless." He exhaled slow. "The railman wasn't after land. He was after me, wants to buy the whole operation, said I could retire rich. Said I was working myself into an early grave. And you listened." "I wanted to." That silenced her. He stood slowly, grimacing from days of hard drinking. "I didn't write because I didn't know what to say. If I came home, I'd have to keep carrying it all. And I didn't know if I had anything left." "You could have told me that," she said. "I didn't want you to see me fall apart." Alma stepped closer. "I married a man who'd already been broken. I don't want someone who's whole. I want someone who knows how to put the pieces back together." He reached for her hand. She didn't give it, not yet. "Do you want to go back?" she asked. He nodded, then stand up and prove it. It took them 3 days to ride home. She let him lead the way, but not out of respect, out of calculation. He needed to remember what it felt like to earn his place beside her again. They arrived to firelight. The main barn had been set ablaze, not accidental this time, not a warning. The Bennick brothers had returned, and this time they weren't playing polite. The foreman met them at the gate, shirt torn, blood on his temple. One of the ranch hands was missing. Another lay gut-shot in the bunkhouse. "They waited till sundown," he said. "Came masked, rode hard. We fought 'em off best we could." Monroe looked at Alma. "We go after them," he said. She nodded, but her eyes had gone cold, not vengeful, just precise. She had waited her whole life to fight for something that mattered. Now that it was under threat, she'd tear down whoever tried to take it from her. The hunt would begin at first light. They rose before the sun. Monroe saddled his mare in silence. Alma packed only what she needed: bullets, water, a bandage roll, dried corn bread wrapped in wax paper. She wore her oldest coat, the one torn at the elbow, the one with the pocket just deep enough for a blade. The foreman wanted to ride with them. Monroe shook his head. "You've bled enough," he said. "But I haven't," Alma added. They left without ceremony, crossing the still dark scrubland at a steady lope. Alma's limp was worse after the ride from Fort Worth, but she gritted her teeth and rode tall. The land stretched out flat and brutal ahead of them, all thorns and faded grass, crows shifting from fence post to fence post as if they too were watching. They tracked the Bennick brothers by what they'd left behind. Half-burned whiskey bottles, a spent shell near the creek, prints from 2 geldings, and a roan Mustang heading west towards Snakeback Ridge. The country there was lawless, reed rock and canyon scars, home to broken men hiding from consequence. It took a day and a half to catch their trail proper. When they reached the base of the ridge, Alma pulled her horse short. She pointed. "There," she said, "smoke." A thin thread, barely visible in the late sun. They tied the horses out of sight and crept on foot, Monroe moving with the old muscle memory of a man who'd known war. Alma followed, slower, Kane left behind. She leaned on trees, on stones, always forward, always quiet. The Bennett camp was crude, 3 bedrolls, a rusted coffee pot, one man standing watch while the others argued over something unseen. Monroe recognized the loudest of them, Jeb Bennick, the eldest. He had a twisted nose and a long rifle that he used more for show than skill. "They'll ride soon," Monroe whispered. "Then we hit first." "You sure? I married you to fight beside you. Let's do it right." They didn't wait. Monroe stepped out with his shotgun level, voice hard. "Jeb, you remember me." Jeb turned, startled, hand halfway to his belt. "Kerrigan, what the?" Alma fired once, a clean shot. The man on watch dropped before he could draw. Panic surged in the camp. Jeb reached for his rifle. Monroe winged him in the shoulder. The third brother, a wiry, nervous man, sprinted toward the brush. Alma caught him in the leg, her second shot true despite the uphill angle. Jeb scrambled backward, hand bloody, spitting curses. "You bitch," he hissed at Alma. "You crippled, witch-legged whore." She walked up to him slowly, pistol aimed steady. "I was crippled the day your type left me to die outside Little Rock," she said. "Didn't stop me then, won't now." Jeb lunged, she fired into his gut. He gasped once, eyes wide with disbelief, then crumpled to the ground. The other brother moaned behind her, half-conscious from blood loss. Monroe walked to her side. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Together they buried the 2 dead men in a shallow pit. Left the third with a jug of water and a message. "Tell whoever's left that the Carrigans don't scare, and the woman runs the ranch now." They rode home as the sun bled behind the hills. When they returned, the workers were still repairing the barn. Children stared as Alma dismounted and limped toward the house, her coat torn, dust coating her like ash. She didn't speak, just nodded once to the foreman, who tipped his hat with something like reverence. That night she sat beside Monroe in the dark. Neither touched the whiskey. They didn't need it. "You regret it?" he asked finally. "No," she said. "I waited too long in this life to regret what was earned." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "You think they'll come again?" he asked. "Always." "And us." She looked at him. "We're not something that needs protecting anymore," she said. "We're the storm that breaks what tries to take us." Monroe smiled, just barely. They said nothing more. The fire crackled. The wind outside shifted like it had changed direction just for them. By autumn, the ranch stood whole again. The barn was rebuilt stronger, the roof sloped better for runoff. Fences stretched cleaner, tighter, reinforced with wire instead of old rope. The river tract Monroe once thought to sell now irrigated a new field, Alma's idea, a tough strain of sorghum she swore would survive anything. And it did. People still talked, they always would, but the talk had changed. They called her Mrs. Kerrigan now, but never with condescension, not after what she'd done, not after what they'd all seen. When the county surveyor came riding through with tax questions and thinly veiled interest in parcel rights, he was met not by Monroe, but by Alma. She met him under the oak near the well, ledger open, rifle leaned casual against the porch post. "We don't sell," she told him flatly. "I was only asking." "You've got your answer. You can go now." And he did. She moved through the house like she'd always been in it, never afraid of its silences. She replaced Monroe's dead wives in every visible way and none of the expected ones. Their photographs still hung in the hall. Alma never touched them. She didn't pretend to fill shoes. She brought her own. When Monroe fell sick, just a fever, quick and burning, Alma nursed him herself. She didn't let the doctor poke too long, didn't let the cook in with superstitions. She stayed by his bed and spoke low when the fever dreams came. "You're not dying," she whispered once when he shook and moaned. "You don't get to leave me like that." He recovered in 2 days, hoarse and weak. She was already outside when he woke, chopping wood slow and methodical, sweat soaking through her blouse. He watched her from the window and didn't call out. There were still quiet moments between them, but they were not the same kind of quiet. Before it had been caution. Now it was something earned, worn in, trusted. One night near winter, Monroe asked her, "What would you have done if I'd married someone else?" Alma was cleaning her rifle, hands precise. She didn't look up. Left the same day, rode east until my bones gave out, or maybe west. "Doesn't matter. Would you have loved again?" She set the cloth down. "I didn't love before you." He nodded slow. "I never saw myself ending up like this," she said after a long silence. "Married, rooted. But I like it." "You were meant to rule something," he said. "Better this than a grave." She smirked faintly. "Or a brothel, or a debtor's ditch, or begging bread from the back of a church. You think of those things often." She nodded. "That's how I know they won't catch me." He moved to her side, didn't kiss her, just touched the scar on her hand where the bone had once splintered through. "I used to think I needed a perfect woman," he said, "one who'd make my name prettier. Someone tall, fertile, pretty to look at in town." She raised an eyebrow. "You are none of those," he added, and she huffed a laugh. "But I never knew what I needed until I saw you walk across my dirt like you were already its owner." She leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the fire died down, and the only sound left was wind across the shingles. The following spring, Alma began building something of her own. She had a plot cleared north of the house. Small, no more than a quarter-acre. She brought up stone from the dry creek bed and laid it herself, one aching motion at a time. "What are you making?" Monroe asked. "A school," she said, "for the ranch children." "You think they need books. I think they need to see that someone like me can teach them." He didn't argue. He sent for timber and a roofman. The school opened in June, and the first thing she wrote on the chalkboard was this: "Nothing that's broken can't be sharpened." The Carrigan Ranch weathered 5 more hard years. Fires, floods, a brief border war. But it held, and when Monroe died, peacefully at 72, with her hand in his and the sound of cattle lowing far off in the distance, Alma did not weep. She took the same cane he'd once watched her walk in with and planted it in the earth beside his grave like a marker. Then she turned back to the ranch, her ranch now, and nothing could take it from her, not men, not time, not the gods.